Tuesday, July 4th, 2023, Maneco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. We're going to look at the petrodollar today and the BRICS. They're both highly related, especially in the last few years they have been. And in my opinion, the petrodollar is on its last legs. And some of you might be asking, what does that mean? And that's what we're going to look at today. Before I start, just like to let you know that I even have a petrodollar files under the playlist part of my YouTube channel. There's loads of videos there about the petrodollar. I've been covering it for the last 6 years. So what is the petrodollar and how is it related to the BRICS? How is it even related to Nigel Farage? You might think, what's the petrodollar, the BRICS, and Nigel Farage? What's the common theme or thread amongst those three? It doesn't seem to make any sense. Well, we have to go back to the Bretton Woods Agreement of 1944 to understand the petrodollar. And back then, the United States, of course, was fighting a war with the Allies. And by 1944, they pretty much knew that they're going to win. So they're designing a new monetary system for the post-war era, post-1945. And that's what the Bretton Woods system was. And as the United States had accumulated a lot of gold, not just during World War II, but also during World War I, because the U.S. During World War I fought only in the last year. And prior to that, it was providing a lot of stuff to the warring nations and earning a lot of gold, because gold is money, of course. And in times of war, you don't take paper as payment. So the United States ended up with 2/3 of the world's official reserves of gold by the end of World War II. So the agreement was that the dollar would be pegged to gold at $35 an ounce. And all the other currencies would be pegged to the dollar at a fixed rate. And any country within that agreement that ran a surplus of dollars, they could go to the U.S. Treasury and exchange those dollars for gold at $35 an ounce. And that's how it was. It wasn't really a pure gold standard, because the other countries' currencies weren't really pegged to gold, and the dollar was king, so to speak, and the dollar was supposed to be as good as gold. But by the 1960s, late 60s, the United States started abusing that privilege. They started inflating the money supply without the gold backing, and countries, major countries within that agreement, like France, even Great Britain and others, they started demanding a redemption for gold, because they knew the U.S. was inflating. So by 1971, there was a run on the U.S. Treasury. Then they didn't have enough gold. If Nixon hadn't closed the gold window or defaulted temporarily, the Treasury would have been cleaned out. And that's what happened. So the United States basically screwed up the Bretton Woods system. And I'm not trying to blame Americans per se. This is all to do with the administrations that in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, that their policies of war, the social welfare program, I think it was the Great Society program, Lyndon Johnson, that's what led to the inflation. And of course, inflation is the creation of currency and credit out of thin air. There's no gold backing. So the whole system collapsed. It was a huge event. I was alive back then, but I was only about 5 years old, maybe just turned 6, and I had no idea what it meant, or probably I didn't even hear about it. But I felt the consequences. I think everyone did in the 70s. It was rising prices. They call it inflation, but I would say the inflation happened in the run-up to the 70s and kept happening. So the whole system broke down. All these currencies that were supposed to be pegged to the dollar and to gold indirectly, all of a sudden they weren't pegged, and everyone started cheating. What does that mean? Well, they started printing money out of thin air, and their currencies were floating, free floating, and the free floating started in 1973. Prior to 1973, they tried to keep the fixed exchange rates, but if there's no backing to the currency, it couldn't be done. So Nixon, and also with the help of Henry Kissinger, the Americans went to the Saudis and said, we've got this deal for you. You sell all your oil in dollars, and we'll defend your kingdom. And that was the petrodollar. And why is it important? Well, because the world depended, and still does, on oil. And a lot of countries don't produce oil, so they need to buy oil. And if they needed dollars to buy oil, and OPEC and the Saudis are the biggest producers, they needed to earn dollars, and there would be demand for the dollar, and that's what's kept the dollar going, even though it had no backing. It was the deal with the Saudis, but that's been going out the window in the last few years. And why? Well, because the United States has been abusing the power it has with the petrodollar by sanctioning other countries that it doesn't agree with what they're doing politically or geopolitically. They've been using the petrodollar as a weapon. And pretty much like the banks now are closing, not just Nigel Farage's accounts, but other people's accounts who they don't agree with. So, and I think these countries in the BRICS, like Russia, China, maybe Brazil to some extent, and many others that are not in the BRICS yet, they've seen this happening now for the last 10, 15, or even 20 years, all these sanctions. And they're saying to themselves, we need a group of countries that need to fight this. And this is what has been happening. And back in 2021, when the U.S. left Afghanistan, the week after, it was very significant. The Russians went to Saudi Arabia, and they signed a defense cooperation agreement with the Saudis, and that was pretty much like another nail in the coffin of the petrodollar. But if you go into my playlist about the petrodollar, you will see that I've been warning about this since 2017, and I said at the time it wasn't going to be overnight, because you need a lot of financial infrastructure, trade infrastructure, to make sure that when you go for this system, that you've got a lot of people on board, because you don't want to do it alone, like Saddam Hussein tried to do, or Muammar Gaddafi tried to do. If you've got dozens of nations behind you, it's much easier, and especially when you have Russia and China behind you. So, the beginning of this video, I said that I think the days of the petrodollar are almost over. So why do I say that? Well, we know, or hopefully you know already, I've spoken about this, there's a BRICS summit in South Africa. I think it starts on the 22nd. And yesterday, the Russian embassy in Kenya, they tweeted this out. The BRICS countries are planning to introduce a new trading currency, which will be backed by gold. More and more countries recently expressed desire to join BRICS. So I think this is huge. Is this why I've been buying gold and silver? Because I thought there was going to be a new gold-backed currency. Not really, because I started this back in 2002 when I realized that our monetary system was totally not fit for purpose, a fiat currency system. That's when I started stacking. And I'm not telling you to buy gold here. And even if this wasn't happening, I'd still be stacking. But it could be very significant. And a lot of people have been, of course, poo-pooing this. They haven't been focusing on it, especially people in the mainstream financial press. But I think it's going to happen, and the world will be shocked. But hopefully you won't be shocked, because you've been like listening to me and other people that have been covering this and have been warning about it. So what are the consequences of the petrodollar really losing a lot of power? Well, the consequence, we're already seeing it. We're seeing higher prices, higher interest rates. And why is that? Well, because there's going to be less demand for the dollar, for the pound, for the euro, because these countries, even though they will need dollars, euros, and pounds to deal with the UK, the EU, and the US, they won't need as many dollars, because they will have their own gold standard, so to speak. The other thing that was announced yesterday that I thought was interesting, and I'll show it to you here. And I think it was Wall Street Silver who tweeted this out. They said, exclusive, India refiners start yuan payments for Russian oil imports. So there you go, not dollars, yuan. And they could use any other currency, really. They could use rubles to buy Russian oil. They could use rupees, as long as they settle at the end of the year if there's a surplus or a deficit. So the other thing that's happening, and I've spoken about this as well, and there's a guy from Credit Suisse, Zoltan Pozsar, who's been warning about it. Back in January, I spoke about Zoltan's commodity encumbrance and the challenge to Pax Americana. So it looks like China as well is going to limit the supply of some of the rare earth metals, and they're very important, of course. And China has like 94% of the production of these rare earth metals. It's going to be very hard to create a supply chain of these outside China. It will take years, and they're really important for semiconductor, telecommunications, and electric vehicle sectors. So there you go. That's another part of this this game. So this is how it's going to affect us. We're going to have more shortages. Things are going to be more expensive because the world is changing, and it's all to do with the money. So how do you protect yourself? Well, hopefully you've been listening to me and others, and you have been stacking. But there's no easy way to protect yourself. The world's going to change. And yes, the people in the West, the powers that be, the economists in the mainstream, they're going to give a lot of other reasons for why we have higher prices, for why we have disruptions. They're going to blame greedy businessmen, and we're going to have even the Bank of England, who said that I think any gender can have a baby or be pregnant. They're going to be blaming also the climate change for all these things. But I think what you need to know, that it is all got to do with the petrodollar and the challenge to it. The other thing I noticed is that Janet Yellen, the Secretary of the Treasury, is going to Beijing, and I don't think she was invited. She's going this week, I think on Thursday to Saturday, and to talk about the supply chain. I think the United States is worried about what's happening, especially with the rare earth metals. So there you go. With that, let's quickly look at where the markets are this morning. The markets in Europe are going to be quiet today because the US is out for the 4th of July, but things still trade. So it's 8:03 a.m. London time. We've got spot gold at 1927. It's up about $5. Silver is just trading below 23. It's up 7 cents. The Dow, Nasdaq, and S&P futures are pretty much unchanged. The currencies, the pound is up 0.1%. just above 127. The euro is unchanged, 109.11. The dollar is down 0.2 versus the yen at 144.45. And the dollar is down 0.5% versus the yuan at 7.22. Aussie dollar is up 1/8%, 66.80. The dollar is down 1/8 versus the Canadian dollar, 132.33. And the Kiwi dollar, that's up 1/3 at 61.70. To the general commodities, WTI crude is up 0.75% at 70.40. Brent is up about 2/3 as well at 75.11. Platinum is up $10, trading at 9.22. And high-grade copper is up 1/3%, just below 381. So we'll finish off with the UK bond market. Treasury market is closed today, so there's no trading there. The 2-year yield, UK gilt 2-year yield is continuing to rise. We're now at 5.42, up 8 basis points. And the 10-year is also continuing to creep up. It's at 4.51. So with that, I'm going to wish you all a very good day. And to my viewers in the US, a very good 4th of July. Take care. Bye.